No talent billionaire Jerry Seinfeld's follow-up to 2007's B-movie is a fictionalized origin story of the Pop-Tart? Why not? That has the worst title of the 5 that he came up with at whatever East Hampton hedge fund brunch he was attending when this nothing idea shit itself into the last remains of his milk-with-toast brain. Unfrosted. And that's not the only thing that this movie doesn't have in common with Guy Fieri. Frosted Tips. Because unlike the mayor of Flavortown, Unfrosted is boring with a capital B and it hasn't been outside in years. For a guy who made his reputation on observational humor, Jerry Seinfeld hasn't made a resonant observation for 20 years, probably longer. After all, this is the guy who spent the height of his fame post-blowjob Mitzi... Wait, I'm going to start that one over.
It's a live show. All right, well, this is part of it. It's exciting.
After all, this is a guy who spent the height of his fame telling post-blowjob Mitzi Shore anecdotes to a 17-year-old. No entertainer has ever been more disconnected from the realities of the human experience than the Bill Belichick of comedy, Jerry Seinfeld. As long as Bill Belichick and Tom Brady were on the same team, as you know, the sports media could entertain the fantasy that they were somehow equally responsible for the success of the New England Patriots. But after they split ways, one of them went on to create Curb Your Enthusiasm, and the other one couldn't get a job with the Atlanta Falcons. My favorite team, by the way. Unfrosted. Directed, written, produced by, and starring Jerry Seinfeld. It was the story he had to tell. Let's start with directed by. To call the camera work in Unfrosted stiff would be an insult to stiffness. I don't think Jerry Seinfeld knows that cameras can move in 2024. They have wheels now. You can put it on a dolly. You can get a steady cam. This movie makes the jazz singer look like Train Spotting in terms of how much the camera doesn't move around.
Nice joke.
Jazz singer was the first talkie, so he literally couldn't move the camera anywhere.
I love it.
And look, it's one thing to be efficient with your scenes. It's another to be completely impatient with them. I've never seen a movie be in more of a rush to be over than Unfrosted. Every scene rushes to the next scene as quickly as possible, as though to say, oh boy, that sucked. Maybe the next scene will be better. And it's not. It's usually worse. Written by Jerry Seinfeld and like 4 other guys. This script would make way more sense if it was the sketches that Jerry Seinfeld got paid to write for the Kellogg's annual corporate retreat than an actual movie, and even then it would need a punch-up. This script wouldn't make Jimmy Fallon laugh, but it's not just that it's painfully, relentlessly unfunny, it's that it's so lazy and incoherent. Directed by Jerry Seinfeld, written by Jerry Seinfeld, starring Jerry Seinfeld. Let's talk about Jerry Seinfeld's performance.
Yeah, what'd you think of Jerry Seinfeld's performance?
He's a terrible, unresourceful actor. I don't know what else to say. His line reads have the dramatic rhythm of your exhausted dad reading you a bedtime story. Honestly, the best way I can explain this is, and this happened in Notting Hill. You know that classic scene in a movie where there's 2 people that they're usually like dating, they're getting to know each other, and one of the people in the relationship is an actor, and then the other person in the relationship who's not an actor is like, oh, I'll help you run lines. Sure. Right? Like Hugh Grant does in Notting Hill. It's a scene you've seen 100 times before. And then the person who's not the actor is bad at reading the line because they're pretending to not be an actor. It's an actor pretending to not be an actor, right? So in Notting Hill, in this scene, Julia Roberts will be like, like, Mr. President, we have to act fast if we're going to stop nuclear war. And she's like really good. And then Hugh Grant will be like, okay, like what are I need the launch, I need to prevent the launch codes from falling, That's how Jerry Seinfeld actually acts in this movie. He's like the actor pretending to be a bad actor in the scene where they run lines in Notting Hill or in whatever other movie you can think of that has that scene. And I can forgive Jerry Seinfeld for not realizing that he personally is unlikable as a person, which he clearly does not realize, because he's so sort of shocked by criticism, which is why he's off on this whole, wokeism is ruining comedy. And it's like, no, people just don't like you and you're bad at this. I can forgive him for not realizing that he's unlikable because that's a fairly human trait. I probably don't know the ways I'm unlikable to other people. You're blind to your own unlikability in certain ways. I can understand that. What I don't understand is how he doesn't realize that his character in this movie is unlikable. This is like a deeply, deeply unlikable character. It is a sort of like pitchman for Serial who just wants to poison the children of America so he can have sod on his front lawn. He's a villain. But Jerry Seinfeld plays him like an irascible, fun, sort of like almost like an underdog. And that's the weirdest thing about Jerry Seinfeld.
Spot on. Like I never that's exactly right.
No matter how much money Jerry Seinfeld gets, no matter how much power he gets, no matter how much influence he gets, he literally, despite how bad this script is, Jerry Seinfeld snapped his fingers and got the entire indie comedy scene in this movie, and A-list comedians, just Amy Schumer, Melissa McCarthy, etc.
Everybody you could think of.
He just can't grasp that he's a villain of life. He can't, like, himself or the characters he plays, he still thinks of himself as this sort of like underdog. It's bizarre. It's truly bizarre. And the way in this movie, the way that he like ropes Melissa McCarthy he sort of like tricked Melissa McCarthy into being his like comedy partner. Like they're doing like a Martin and Lewis sort of thing, to use a reference that Jerry Seinfeld would appreciate. Like they're doing like a two-hander back and forth. They already have bits. Like before the movie even started, they have like bits. These two people had bits going back into history. Like they have, and it's like Melissa McCarthy deserves way better than this. And Jerry Seinfeld, you don't get to just like, I know you made Seinfeld and you're a billionaire and you can snap your fingers and make Unfrosted. You don't get to just like suddenly be Melissa McCarthy's comedy partner. You don't have the chops. B, it's rude. C, she's nice and kind and like and great at her job. So she like is she somehow makes the lines work.
She gets away
They're
from
not
this whole
funny,
experience
but she like Melissa
scot-free.
McCarthy's the lines.
I think I don't think one iota less of Melissa. After she just like does her thing, like takes a job and does her thing and is totally fine. It's not her fault, anything that's not working.
But look, leave her alone. Leave Melissa McCarthy alone. Leave all these people alone. If you wanted to make Unfrosted, you should have had to do it with like Michael Richards, and I'll give you Bill Burr as JFK. That's it. And then everybody else is you're on your own. But you don't get, how does he just get everybody in this movie?
Seinfeld.
Yes, he's Jerry. Exactly. Let's redefine. This is the start of it, okay? Somehow he got through B-movie. Somehow he got through dumb comedians in cars. Now is the time that we redefine what the word Seinfeld means in popular culture. The luckiest thing that ever happened to him is that that the biggest sitcom of all time was named after him, so that his name inherently became synonymous with like top tier comedy. But that was a mistake because he's the worst part of the show. That show should have been named Elaine. It should have been named Costanza. It should have been named Kramer before it was named Seinfeld. It should have been named Larry David. But his name became synonymous because he was the sort of the main character of the show. But now he has sort of tricked the world into thinking that because his name is Seinfeld, it's like if you know, you were you're like the 8th generation of Kleenex. You're some Nepo baby of Kleenex, but because your last name is Kleenex, you're synonymous with like the best like tissues in the world, even though you don't know like your ass from your elbow because you're just he just tricked the world into thinking that he's a great comedian because his name was the name of the best sitcom ever, but he did the least work to actually make it the best sitcom of all time. And now that's becoming clear, to go back to the Bill Belichick analogy. Tom Brady's in Tampa Bay, baby. Larry David has finished Curb Your Enthusiasm. Though even with the bad final seasons, the word is out. Seinfeld sucks. He's not a good comedian, and we need to start redefining that name in popular culture so that when Seinfeld calls, it should be like Carlos Mencia calling you for a movie. It's silly to talk about plot holes in Unfrosted because it's like, why would I do it? But I do want to talk about a big one. Want to talk about a big one because
there's more than one. There's more than one. Just confirming.
I think there's more than one.
But the most glaring one to your eye was.
I mean, for a movie to have plot holes, it has to have a plot. So I don't even know if they're plot holes. But there's like the main arc of the movie is a plot hole, which is the one I want to talk about, which is that the movie is about Post and Kellogg's quest to create the Pop-Tart. They're in like a space. They're in like a space race, which is the analogy is made literal by the way they film the Pop-Tart as though it's like the space.
It's the right
Apollo
stuff, but with
taking
Pop-Tarts.
off. It's the right stuff with Pop-Tarts, right?
It is.
So it's the space race, but for Pop-Tarts, Post versus Kellogg's. The flaw in the story is that at the very beginning of the movie, they're like 99% of the way there. They've basically already created the Pop-Tart. At the beginning of the movie, they're sitting in meeting rooms on either sides of this street where Post and Kellogg's are on, and they're like, we need to create like a sort of strawberry jam-filled pastry that will can be made in a toaster oven. Like they're describing everything that a Pop-Tart is, and as they're describing it, it's like, just make the fucking thing. You're not describing the splitting of the atom. This isn't Oppenheimer. Hey guys, what you just said, go do that and then come up with a name for it. But then the movie acts as though it's like, we've got to get out the chalkboard and do the equations, and we've got to get in the best minds of our generation from consumerism and marketing to figure this out and figure out every aspect of it. It's like, you're already at the finish line at the beginning of the movie. So the rest of the movie makes next to no sense. It would only make sense if they really leaned into it as a spoof of that kind of movie, but they don't. It gets stranded in between spoof and actually being like the founder or something like that. You know, in the movie about the starting of McDonald's. But the movie is already at the finish line at the beginning and then acts like it has to take this long journey to create the Pop-Tart. And it's like, you've already basically created it.
Yeah, they had like Sputnik Pop-Tart. Yeah. But they didn't like land on the moon yet. And also, it's all that.
It's a fucking Pop-Tart.
You know, it seems obvious to us now, but, you know, the Pop-Tart was truly a radical invention that took a lot of American ingenuity.
If you liked this movie, it will be the end of this podcast.
Am I going now?
Imagine if you legitimately liked this movie.
Am I going? Here's what I thought of the movie.
Yes, please.
Unfrosted by Jerry Seinfeld. It's weird to watch something that the person who made it, who bore it, who brought it to the finish line doesn't care about it. It's so disposable. Yeah. It's like silly almost to critique it. This person that made it isn't interested in anything at all, except I guess ostensibly like some comedy. I guess this person likes this. It's a shame they don't make comedy movies anymore. So when
Jerry Seinfeld, they definitely won't.
So Jerry Seinfeld wants to make a comedy movie, like in theory, great, and he can pull big actors because he's Jerry Seinfeld. Okay, and Netflix will pay for it. Great, and good news, it's a joke movie, aka like all the lines are jokes, and it's not too serious. It's going to be funny all the way through, and we're going to get funny people to play funny characters. So in theory, that's fine, and also in theory, like Pop-Tarts mapped onto the space race as a spoof of The Right Stuff. Or a spoof of sort of our obsession with, our business movies where people are getting the business off the ground. Like, okay, in theory, that's a fine idea too. But none of this is executed well. It's so dry. It's so unfunny. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's also not really a movie. It's definitely content. And it's so disposable that it's heartless. And it really reveals its perversity at the end when Seinfeld has his cast dance over the credits.
Joe, the dance.
That's when it became.
The dance and
it went
outtakes.
From like bad
the
to
dance
perverse.
And the outtakes together was perverse.
It went from bad and useless and kind of a waste of my time, like an 80-minute waste of my time, to something insidious and something that I absolutely hated. Jerry,
it's like, bro, you didn't just make like 40-Year-Old Virgin or something about Mary.
So weird.
Like you just farted. That was like a fart. You did nothing. You did nothing.
Making everyone
and then he made them all dance. Do the dance.
The
ending.
Dancing was so. They did the dance ending. It was so perverse. Jerry made a movie worshiping cereal, and I it's sort of like an idea a dad has that like he says to his comedy writing children, and they all go, "Yeah, Dad, that would be really fun."
Yeah.
But they don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it.
But he does it. He has a really weird connection with cereal. And watching his like 1968, his idea of Battle Creek, Michigan in 1968, and like the colors and sort of, his idyllic Americana pastiche. Oh, by the way, LOL. There's no pastiche to this movie.
And it was just costume. This is 1968 in date only. This is Eisenhower 50s.
Like this,
exactly.
This is like
this
so
is
true.
Pre-counterculture, Leave It to Beaver America.
Right.
Yeah.
And literally because when they're trying the Pop-Tarts out, it's all like nuclear war coded 50s stuff.
I had forgotten the actual date, and so when they go to the White House, they go into the Oval Office at one point in this movie, and I literally was expecting Eisenhower to come out, and then when Bill Burr comes out as JFK, I was like, oh, this is the 60s?
Oh, because it's Space Race. But anyway,
it's Leave It to Beaver America.
Yeah, right, right. It is. And everyone works at Kellogg's in post, and cereal is idolized and worshipped. There's a montage with You're Just Too Good to Be True playing, where we see everyone like slow motion eating cereal. And that's when I started to realize like cereal, the reason Seinfeld thinks this is a good idea for a broad comedy is cereal was sort of the last time Jerry remembers what it was like to be regular, be one of us.
Yes, that's right.
This is what tethers him to reality, is like cereal is Jerry Seinfeld's Rosebud, and he is making a nostalgic paean to the man he was and trying to find that person. A person that used to love comedy, a person that used to like cereal, and a person, that used to have friends. And he's trying to find all those things. And apparently, not only do I realize that he didn't find it when I watched the movie, but also apparently this was an unfun movie to make that nobody enjoyed, and you could tell when the bloopers started rolling that there were no bloopers because no one was having fun, because this looked like a miserable little movie, but ultimately like disposable, ultimately like not important enough to be bad, just content of the highest order.
You're so right though, Joe, because I watched way too many of Jerry Seinfeld's press appearances around this movie, because the big question is why. Like you made Seinfeld, you make a B movie in 2007, then you take longer than fucking Jonathan Glazer to make another movie, and it's this?
So weird.
It's a movie about Pop-Tarts, but I think you're absolutely right. I think this movie, but it's not just about Pop-Tarts. There's so much like sort of arcana from the 1950s and 60s in this, like the what is it, like the Sea Monkeys and Chef Boyardee and like
all the things he remembers from humanity.
All of this stuff, right? Yeah, it's all this stuff from his childhood, and it is ultimately not just about Pop-Tarts. It is a love letter to all the dumb, archaic elements of American culture that got flushed out by the counterculture. Right. He's like going back pre-counterculture, pre-youth movement, pre-Vietnam, Watergate, et cetera, and it's a love letter to that mind-numbingly dumb era of American culture that spanned, the post-war to late 1960s period, that first like wave of just consumerist garbage culture, that to Seinfeld was a utopia,
right?
Because nobody was talking about cancel culture, nobody was talking about civil rights, no one was talking about anything. You could just like sit on the floor and eat a Pop-Tart and watch TV, and pretend that was the entirety of your world. And that's what Seinfeld in his dotage is trying to get back to, and that's what Unfrosted is ultimately about. But even he can't commit to the bit hard enough because he's embarrassed by the bit. He's embarrassed by he's embarrassed by the reality of the movie, I think.
Maybe, or he's just uninterested.
Or he had lunch. Or he literally had lunch.
He's
at
just
12.
uninterested in everything. That's his affect.
Yes.
That's the energy he brings to every interview and everything. And it's like, okay, then I'm also uninterested in your movie, Jerry. And you can't criticize me. I didn't think it was very funny, and I don't like it. Also, a note on Jerry's anti-woke, we can't do comedy anymore because of the wokeness, and the left has destroyed comedy. Such a funny take.
So funny.
From a man who has made 2 movies about the grocery store in over 25 years. It's just like a bizarre take.
And also
like,
a man
he's famously clean, the famously clean comic. Like
a man
what
who
is
can
the problem?
snap his fingers and get an A-list retinue plus like the best of the indie comedy world in his movie. Bro, you have the world at your fingertips. You can say and do whatever you want. No one's stopping you from doing anything except you.
And so can
except your own limited talent. The only limitation on you is you. It's not the world. It's not wokeism. It's you, baby.